Hi, welcome to Kindred Sessions. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Something that I was, I guess I realized as I was preparing for today, I did my little research, is that you are our first memoirist. That's a word,
Okay.
right? I didn't make
Yes,
that up?
yes.
Okay,
But
good,
if
good,
you
good.
did, it's a great one.
Thank you. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming that. But yeah, you are our first memoirist on the show.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm really
brilliant. I'm
glad that you're
honored.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And to me, I'm someone that very much so enjoys memoirs, maybe because of my career choice, but being able to be in someone's story and to see life through their own experience is something that has always enriched my views of thinking. And I was wondering for you, what is it like to have your life story now be in the world?
I'm okay with it because it's just one story. There are just so many stories in a
Mm.
life
Yeah.
that this is a curation.
Yeah.
And I could still turn out to be an entirely different person, or at least that's the way that I like to fool myself.
I love
Because
that.
yeah, it helps, especially when people are like, "I know all your business," and I'm like, "No, you don't," because
You know
there's
what I
still
shared,
something, yes,
right?
that I keep for myself. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful because you're right. Like, even though this book is not a small book, but this is only a section of your life. So, this is a section that you felt comfortable sharing. And you, like you said, you keep things that are important to you and sacred to you to yourself. And I think that's how we all should view life,
yeah,
maybe,
yeah, yeah.
especially in the age of internet. Like, sometimes keep some things to
Keep a
yourself.
few things to yourself. Yeah, this is
Absolutely.
just a really wonderful cross section of experiences
Mm-hmm.
that I thought would be useful to share. It's structured unlike a typical memoir because it's not, I had this specific experience and
Yeah.
I ended up in this particular location. It is this amalgam of lessons that I've learned from being on the road. So it has that kind of movement that traveling does.
It does feel like I'm on a trip. Yeah, like as like
Excellent.
going through the chapters, I'm like, okay. I mean, also you've been to places, or you mentioned places that I've never been to, but to be able to see it through your lens, I think is a really cool experience too.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Are there any parts of the book that you felt were difficult to write, or maybe brought up things that you weren't necessarily anticipating?
One of the chapters that was the most challenging was on Dancer because I realized in the midst of writing about my divorce how much drag culture had played a part in my recovery. And then I couldn't explore that without looking at the number of queer and trans bodies that are that have expired, the number of people that I knew
Mm,
from that particular scene that I was involved in that had met with very tragic ends.
yeah.
And I also wanted to explore that as a part of the conversation of femininity that we don't talk about, which
Mm-hmm.
is the cost. That often, in order to display your feminine side, it
Yeah.
means that you are met with more violence,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of who you are or where
Yeah.
you're born.
Yeah.
And that was a surprise to me because I assumed that I was just going to be writing this very fun, jubilant story about how I came how I came through this particular situation, and then I
Yeah.
had to think back to the importance of what it meant for me to be saying the story and telling it as part of a community and
Mm,
ways that I could honor people within that community that
right.
might not normally have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. What's sticking out to me is what you mentioned about the cost of beauty. I feel like that's something that I talk about often. And it's shifted throughout the years, but it always remains the same in various ways. And it looks differently depending on where you are, right? And I think that you definitely highlight that in the book as well of where you are and who you interacted with. How do they approach you or accept you or not based off of appearance
Absolutely.
and ability?
And ability.
Yeah.
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 And it was really wonderful to get the opportunity to write a memoir that was looking at what it meant to have a disabled body and move around the world, to have a
Mhm.
chronically ill body and move
Yeah.
around the world, to recognize those characteristics in other people who were
Mm.
also moving about the world. Because, particularly in a post pandemic world, it's something that we need to be talking about a whole lot
Absolutely.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something that I think about too, especially with how much we don't know in regards to long COVID and COVID in general, and all these other illnesses that people are battling, that seemingly maybe came from nowhere, or maybe people are just sharing their experiences more now. I don't think the world we live in is accepting of otherness in a lot of different ways. And that, to me, is kind of what you were describing in the sense of why are we not talking about disability? Why are we still asking for the same things and the same access for everyone?
We treat difference, disability, misfitness, color, gender, we treat all of these things as if they're deficiencies
Mm-hmm.
when people don't line up with what has been established as normalcy without ever looking at the fact that that metric of normal travels,
Yeah.
that the world has not always been this fixed point in
Mm-hmm.
which the binaries were certain,
Yeah.
and our relationship to sexuality was certain, and our
Mm-hmm.
relationship to illness was certain.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that traveling opens my eyes to re-examining the ways that that has shown up historically,
Yeah.
like going to Mexico and visiting Frida Kahlo's house and seeing the ways that she lived as a queer disabled artist, and
Yeah.
how her style of dress was reflective of ways that she could gird herself in
Mm-hmm.
the process of being someone who was disabled.
Yeah.
And
Especially at that time.
yes, yeah, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
I love, is being able to trace those roots back and say, hey, we have always been here, and
Right.
we need to feel entitled to be loud and proud about these stories, because uh, it's been, the misfits, the miscounted, the miscalculated, who have done the greatest service to the world, who have
Yeah.
created the most sensitivity and justice in
Yeah.
this world. And I just want to celebrate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought up Frida Kahlo. She's one of my favorite artists. And at one point I felt shame saying that because I feel like it's so like typical. Oh, but
Right.
the reasons why I do love her is what you described, of that she just did so many things that she wanted to do despite, being disabled. But she never also let you forget that she was disabled, and that
Yeah,
is where her strength and her power came from. Her
absolutely.
sadness and the things that she went through, the grief, the happiness, you saw it all in her work.
Hmm.
And like you said, technology wasn't, of course, what it is now, but from her diaries and things like that, you see the different ways that she was able to maneuver around and to do the things that she really wanted to. And that is so, to me, empowering.
I completely agree. And I loved going to her house and seeing, as someone who does and has done for a very long time, like a really good cosplay of a healthy person, getting to see that her creative practice
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged the amount of rest
Yeah.
that a vulnerable body needs, the amount
Mm-hmm.
of rest that really all of us
I
need. I
mean,
loved
speak
seeing,
on
yeah,
it.
that she had, a bed in front of one easel, and then you walk
Mm-hmm.
like 3 feet and there's a bed in front of another easel.
Yeah.
And just that relationship to light and color all being absorbed from this space where she would also dream,
Yeah.
and remembering how important it is for dreaming to be a part of our creative practices.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love being able to bring those stories in when I talk about what traveling is and what it
Mm.
means. It's
Mm.
the significance of getting to understand that the ways that we need to live, that we often feel ashamed of living,
Mm.
have often been very fruitful
Yeah.
and productive means of creation
Mm-hmm.
that we might not know because of what is just put in front of us as
Right.
the supposed norm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned your creative practice, because that is one of my questions. Like, what does your creative practice look like, and how does it help you mentally, right? How does it kind of ground you mentally, especially when, being in a space of vulnerability in your book, and then also with talking to people about your life?
So much of my personal creative practice is dreaming
Mm.
and imagining a world that I want to live in, and
Mm.
then putting it on the page, and then calling myself to the responsibility of finding that world, creating that world, living in that world.
Yeah.
I have always loved stories. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved stories about travel. And so in writing this book, it was very much a a gift to my childhood self who always
Hmm.
wanted to see the world
Yeah.
and always wanted to be a writer. And so it's this perfect nexus of being able to do these things that
Right.
all were always uh, inspirational to my creativity.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's something that oh, I always talk about our inner child, especially when doing things that feel big and sometimes scary, right? There is a younger version of us that is jumping for joy, right, at the
Mhm.
things that we're able to accomplish.
It's a great way of
Yeah.
thinking about it.
How do you honor that younger version of yourself?
Oh, I'm very mischievous. I try to tamp it down as much as I possibly can, but I'm feeling a lot more inspired to let it out because of getting older, and
Yeah.
also there's a certain wavelength that connects both youth and experience
Yeah.
that I don't think we get to talk about enough.
I
That when
agree.
you're young, you plunge headlong into things because you don't know what the consequences are.
Yeah.
And then you hit an age where you just want to blow stuff up. You just want to see what's going to happen. And I am definitely on the precipice of that age where I just get really excited about the possibility of like, well, I've had some terrible things happen already.
And I've been okay.
Been all right. Let's see what happens if I do something crazy.
Right, right. Yeah, you're right. We do lose that curiosity, I would say, and
Hmm.
confidence, because I think, if anything, children are very confident, right?
Yeah.
They don't really think about consequences because they believe in their abilities to do whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
And life kind of takes that away from us. And that's really sad.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's something that I regained in the amount of rejection I've experienced in
Mm,
trying to fit in the boxes
yeah.
that people told me would make me lovable, would make me
Mm,
acceptable, would make
mm,
me fit in,
yeah.
that they never worked. And I would try and I would try and I would try to force myself in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so revelatory when I stopped trying to cram myself into that tiny, broken cardboard box
Mm-hmm.
that everyone said was where I belonged in order
Yeah.
for me to be acceptable.
And too small to fit you, all
It's
of you.
yeah, especially as somebody who in the book, I mention the fact that I identify as rock star, and I don't mean it facetiously. Like, I really love thinking about the fact that we are stardust and the importance of remembering that we are elemental.
Yeah.
And I still love collections of rocks. I still love looking up at the stars. I still love thinking about how those are all pieces of matter that are made out of similar material that we
Mm-hmm.
are.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that stuff is too precious to put
Yeah.
inside
Yeah.
something manufactured.
I agree. And I think the way that you are even talking about it makes me feel excited to be a person, which is not an
Good,
experience I think we get
good.
often
Yeah.
in the world that we live in. That we're just constantly met with ways that we're not enough, or ways that we could be or do better. So to kind of take it down to these things that seem small, like collecting rocks and looking at the stars and being like, wow, okay, this is all a part of me in a way.
Yeah. And
Why
we're
not treat
just
ourselves
as
so special?
beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
We
beautiful.
are so exquisitely made. And I want us to feel that celebration and that
Yeah.
appreciation of the fact that we get to be here.
Mm.
Sometimes I worry that we have gotten too caught up in the wrong things.
Whew, I
Yeah.
agree. I
That we're
agree.
paying attention to the wrong parts of what it means to be a part of humanity without thinking about what a wonderful privilege it is to just be human,
Yeah.
to have this body and this brain capacity. And what do we do with it other than make each other feel small and
Mm.
make each other feel scared
Yeah.
when there's so much more we are capable of?
Right. Right. If we were to see that spark and light in each other,
Mm-hmm.
I think, of
Mm.
course, like, not to be all woo, but the world would be a much better and easier
I mean,
place to
let's be
be
woo
in.
woo. There's no reason not to.
I'm very woo woo and existential,
Yes.
so I always try to warn people, like, look, I could veer to the left very quickly and be like,
Let's go.
what is the point? Like, what's our purpose here? What is it like to lead a meaningful life, right? What is it like for you? I mean, in this case, like I just mentioned to you, You're reminding me of the joys of being a person and being human, not because of something that you see in me or that I've achieved or anything, but just me as I am.
Just because you are,
Mm.
just because you're here, just because you survived another day, that's traveling, that's journeying,
Yeah.
making it through this system that we live in.
Yeah.
Is a remarkable journey.
It really is.
No matter how you do it
Mm-hmm.
or where you end up,
Yeah.
it's something that I just feel really inspired by.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I talk about traveling in the book, my goal isn't to build a Pinterest board of look what I did.
Right.
It's really to try and inspire people to think about look what you came out of.
Yeah.
You and
Yeah.
your friends went on vacation and none of you managed to get sold. Like that is
a win.
Look at you.
A win.
Look at you.
Right. You're still here, free.
Look at you, free. Still moving around of your full own accord.
Right.
It could be different. And I really see that those are tiny reparations that we can take back from a system that is constantly telling us that who we are and what we do is not enough.
Yeah. Something that you mentioned earlier that I'm sticking to is the amount of rejection that you face. And I read online that it took 9 years to find a publisher for this book.
Yeah.
That is a long time.
It is.
To be sitting on something that I think is so transformative, right? And then to believe in it, to continue to pursue.
I think what was helpful is that the rejection that I experienced in publishing my first memoir was so similar to the rejection that I was used to experiencing in life. So for so long, I had been told that a life like mine was impossible. Wow. Or that it shouldn't continue in the way that it does because, I've had people tell me that I wasn't real or that I am too strange or, that the amalgam of things that I've been told that I should do or be differently. So of course nobody wanted to hear what my life would look like. But that's also why I felt it was really important to audaciously, put myself on the cover because I wanted for us to have to confront what it means to tell people who are disabled, people who are Black, people who are queer, people who are non-binary, people who are all set and sort of misfit that they don't belong to be seen.
Yeah.
So it was kind of my final middle finger to the idea that this story didn't
need
to come out in the world. It's like, you're going to see us. You're going to see us and you're going to love it. And you're going to see us living free and dangerously. And, you can sit in the back seat and be boring if you want to. But that is your personal choice.
Right. I mean, what you mentioned about being on the cover and someone like me or anyone that looks like me seeing you on the cover is inspirational and also healing in so many ways. Like you mentioned, so many books don't include us or have us anywhere in them, on them, or anywhere, right? But you made that conscious decision to allow us to be seen and to allow yourself to be seen. How do you do that on a day-to-day basis?
I think it's easy because I know we won't be here forever. And if I can make some small headway in the idea that we could be seen in a way. I grew up in Kentucky, and I just remember what it meant for me when somebody handed me Bell Hooks's Wounds of Passion.
Wow.
And I read of a Black girl who traveled the earth and loved hard and went to great rock concerts and was hurt and was broken and highly intelligent and was, and was still here and was beloved by generations of people.
Yeah.
And I think of so many Black women. I think of Sonia Sanchez and Gwendolyn Brooks and June Jordan and Audre Lorde. And I can just do this all day.
Yeah.
And because they saw us. I'm like Alice Walker, Toni Morrison,
I mean, the list is
yeah,
so long.
they've been,
Yeah.
and that's what I learned in the process of writing this book. Was I started really contemplating that memoir has been our liberation. Us telling our stories has set us free.
Yeah.
In some instances, literally, that the autobiographies of Harriet Jacobs and Mary Prince were intricately involved in creating abolition. That there would have been no abolitionist movement if we did not have memoir. And so in that way, I see this as an extension of our abolition, is that if we make ourselves seen, if we force the world to understand how beautiful and how sensitive and how vulnerable we are willing to be, we are going to heal. We don't have a choice. It might not be in my lifetime, but I absolutely believe that these are ways that we put each other on the right track, because I wouldn't be here if all of those Black women hadn't made the sacrifices that they had to be seen. So I don't even think about it as me being seen, because like my actual life is playing video games with 2 dogs in between my legs. I love it.
I love it. It's the ultimate.
Yeah, and like slow dancing in the kitchen with my boyfriend, and my sister coming over and cleaning my house, and us kikiing. Like, those are things that you don't necessarily see in the book, but that's like my everyday. So many of my neighbors don't know I'm a writer. They have absolutely no, I always think about that song where J. Cole is like, the neighbors think I'm selling dope, because I am, like, in a way, really, like I kind of am, like when I am sitting on my like rainbow hammock in the middle of the day, and that is work, that is me putting in the work, and every else is like, what do you do for a living?
No, you don't even know what's going on over here.
You don't even know. Now I'm on a world tour, like, but nobody would think that a Black kid who grew up climbing trees and dreaming up stories in Kentucky could make that happen. And I love being a continuation of that lineage.
Yeah. I feel like and what you mentioned about the video games and just living a life, to me that seems perfect. But that some people again would read the book and be like, so you mean to tell me you just stay at home all day? You don't do anything else? Like, I
mean, when I go out, I go out. Like,
like there's a time for everything. I definitely resonate with that. But that's a part of who you are. That's part of your identity.
And it's when I feel when we say. When I see Black people get on a platform and they've won a big award and they say, I am my ancestors' dreams. Like, the time that I feel that the most is when I am on my couch resting in my big ass pillow, with my 2 spoiled Black and free dogs.
A nice blanket. A cup of tea is going.
Exactly. Like something nice bubbling in the Instapot, like that is when I feel like I am absolutely the most my ancestors' dreams. And the writing and the adventuring, what I often tell my friends, is like, whether, what we do tonight, how far we go depends on whether this is just a night out or if it's a tax write-off for me. So let's do the most. Like
let's see where it goes.
So I'm going to go hard because I got to write something.
Right. Like I kind of need some material. So everyone, bring your A game.
Let's do this. Everybody, let's get in line. Let's have fun. But
and then you hibernate.
Exactly. Yep. So that we can dream and rest up for the next adventure.
The idea of dreaming is something that I've been really sitting with this past year, I would say the most, because in the world that we live in, everything is moving so fast. Information is shared fast. People are expected to grieve quickly, to love quickly. Everything is happening so fast. So the idea of stopping and allowing yourself to dream and seeing where those dreams take you is something that feels almost like a luxury to me now, but it shouldn't be that way.
I like thinking of it as luxury in the sense that, what if that's what we were trying to buy instead of fancy clothes and cars? Like, instead of things that were showy, what if the luxury that we were really striving for was on the interior?
Yeah.
Because that would actually be worth it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah.
To be able to buy the time and the space to be able
Yes.
to sit and dream, not dream for someone else or
Yes.
dream of a future you, but to just dream.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree.
What
Yeah.
would you say to someone that feels like they just don't have the space to one, live in their true identity, or two, create the time or allow themselves to dream?
That I was you. And it wasn't until I lost absolutely everything that I thought was important. My
Mm,
marriage fell apart. My health fell apart. I've had multiple careers that have fallen apart. I've had friendships that I thought would last my entire life
mm,
crumble in front of me.
yeah.
And the thing that I had left was dreaming. That as long as I could step back and dream a different world, there was always going to be a world that received me.
Wow.
And it was just a matter of time between those dreams and then me manifesting those dreams. Because I always like to talk about the fact that I just very much am. This book is in many ways a love letter to the amount of spiritual growth that I've watched happen in the Black community
Mm,
over the past few years, particularly, I think, in light of all of the protesting and
right.
work that we've done, and then realizing that we have to turn ourselves toward the interior
Mm-hmm.
because we can't fix a trash ass system. We can't fix a broken earth.
No.
But what we can do is conserve our energy and take those beautiful parts of ourselves on the inside and let them cultivate and grow
Yeah.
until there's somewhere to plant them.
Yeah.
So I have been you if you're out
Mm,
there dreaming and it's hurting. And I do believe that continuing to work with that practice, to
yeah.
love yourself in it, it can make the world better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, right, you're describing what it's like to prioritize yourself in a world that tells you that that is wrong, right? What it's like to do the work internally so that you can continue to show up and dream and to be a human and be in your body. These are things that we don't really see as good or even talked about, right? Not a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I mean, of course, people like you, and there's a couple other people, of course, but not
We're
nearly
growing.
enough.
Yeah,
Not nearly
it's
enough.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does your spiritual and mental practice look like just in the world that we live in? All of the tragedy and the grief that we're navigating through, and all of the needs and expectations that are placed on us. How do you center self?
Well, when I first realized that my body was changing, and medically everyone was saying that it was all in my head and that I
Mm.
was a drama queen, which we've all heard in different capacities.
We shouldn't still be hearing that, but
No, but we do.
here we are.
I've been I've been in situations where I've been very close to death and been kicked out of an ER with security, being told that I was faking it.
Wow.
Because that's how big the medical crisis is in this country, particularly when it comes to bodies that are already marked with an expiration date.
Yeah.
And I had to figure out how I was going to live, knowing that it was in the medical world's best interest to get rid of me
Yeah.
as one more part of a demographic that they weren't interested in treating.
Mm.
And what I found was breathing. Part of my travels have been finding ways to commune with the earth, and with people who have a better understanding of indigenous practices than what I grew up with, because I started to understand that as much therapy as I'd done, as much, I did all the things. I was a grade A student when it
I
came to
get
all
it.
the things you're
Yeah,
supposed to check off the
I get it.
list. But when it came to understanding the spiritual rift that is being torn apart from your ancestry, from any connection to your genealogy, from any
Mm-hmm.
connection to a sense of being a people.
Right.
I love how Hortense Spillers talks about we call each other brother and sister because we don't know whether or not we're related,
Right.
you know? And so going back into communities that still maintained those practices and finding people who I could just sit at the feet of and learn very simple things,
Mm.
because I was also just kind of tired of the meditative practice that was being introduced to me in the Western world, where it's still very capitalist. It's about what you
Very.
can achieve. And that
Yeah.
was, I was doing hot yoga 5 times a day, and now
Yeah.
I've, you know, I had to have about 6 surgeries to correct the amount of stuff that it was doing to my
Yeah.
body that I thought was health
You
that
you
was
think it's
not.
great, right? You're like, yeah, they say, do it, and then, it feels good, but your body didn't resonate with it.
No, and I just like mentioning it because if there's people out there that's struggling, I want them to know that I struggle too. And what I
Hmm.
just found was breathing. That one of the first exercises um, that a holistic person, or a holistic doctor, scientist, whatever you want to say, that I encountered in Bermuda taught me was to just go out into the ocean and just breathe.
Mm.
And I carry that with me now,
Yeah.
that I carry the waves as a way of maintaining my own heartbeat and
Yeah.
maintaining a sense of gravity.
Mm.
And I love that because of knowing how many of us were lost in those oceans, that
Mm.
I feel the edification of what it means for me to be in the bodies of people who lifted me up and allowed me to survive this long.
Yeah.
And when I keep that in mind, that's the only meditation I need. If that's all I can, if I all I can do in the day is just
That's
make
more
sure I
than
have a couple of
enough.
minutes where I
Hmm.
breathe consciously and remember the waves, it works for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell myself and everyone around me, like, we always have our breath. Well, till we don't, but it's something that we can always come back to, and it's completely free. But it's the thing I think we run away from often, right? Forcing yourself to slow down and focus on your breath means that you're going to be present, and then you're present with whatever is coming up.
Hmm.
A lot of us don't want to confront and sit with whatever is in our bodies, right? That's begging for our attention,
Hmm.
begging to be heard and seen, so
It's terrifying.
it
It can
is.
be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot easier to kind of dissociate.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to do it. There's so
Yes.
many ways to do it. But
It is an art form.
it really is.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you talked about figuring out what worked for you.
Hmm.
I think that's something that the wellness industry and everything doesn't account for. It's like, do all of these things. Doesn't matter who you are, but if you want to live a certain lifestyle, make sure you do all of these things and then you'll do it. Not checking in with our bodies at all,
Mm-mm.
not checking with our minds, our soul, our spirit, anything.
Mm-mm.
You know.
And that was why these practices were created.
Mhm.
How we've moved so far away from understanding that meditation is just checking in, you
That's
know,
it.
that it's
You don't need
it's
a nap.
it's just prayer, you know,
You
it's
don't
just
need
a
an
nap.
app,
It's, like
right?
it's,
Like,
yeah,
you can do it anywhere.
yeah,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be anything specific. It doesn't have to look a certain way. And
Yeah.
I do remember the years and years I spent feeling inadequate because it was
Hmm.
just never something that worked for me.
Yeah.
And coming to the understanding that it was just something that was never going to work for my body or never going to work for my time.
Hmm.
It's a real revelation to see that I can find the space that makes me comfortable, that makes me happy,
Yeah.
and that's good enough. That's
Hmm.
all I have to do in this little
Hmm.
life,
Hmm.
is just make sure that I keep breathing in a healthy and proper way and
Yeah.
show as much love as I can.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even in sitting with you and reflecting on the book, I'm like, I know my first question was, how does it feel to have your story in the wild? But I feel a sense of peace sitting with you.
Yeah.
Even in that question, I was like, ooh, like maybe they won't have, I mean, how are they going to feel if I ask that question? But you seem so comfortable, and maybe even ecstatic to
Yeah.
know that this story is out there. And I'm wondering, what would you share with someone who wants to write, but is unsure or nervous or anxious about what it would be like to put themselves out there and to be vulnerable in the way that you have?
I say that if you want to write, it means that you're already writing because it's something that you love.
Hmm.
But what you have to ask yourself is why.
Yeah.
If the reason why you want to write is because you want to be seen, it's important to understand that you will not be seen or loved in the ways that you expect to be when it comes to writing.
Yeah.
Its return is not always glamorous,
Mhm.
but if just the act of being able to put down your story moves you, delights you, then it can be just a wonderful lover, mother, family member to have the page as part of your practice.
Wow. I think what you mentioned about it, you wanting to be seen and acknowledging that you won't be seen the ways that you want to, I think goes beyond writing
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of different ways. A lot of us struggle with that. You know, I did all of these things. Why are you still not seeing me? You know, what else can I do to feel seen?
And it's frustrating because it is hard. I mean, this is my fifth book, and there are still times where I go places and people say, "Congratulations on your debut," or
And you're like,
"Congratulations on your second book," as if I have not
what
been
about my other,
busting my tail.
right, for years? All the
Trying
other
to,
things I've written, like, are
right.
they just, you know, they're not
Or
important to you?
yeah. Well, you're obviously not paying attention. Or the commentaries that I've gotten over the years about being verbose or dense or overly intellectual or worse, articulate.
Oh God. I'm
The
sorry.
worst insult of
That
them
is
all.
the worst.
But then what always saves me is that so it goes for so many of the people I'm writing for, that the people who see me are experiencing that same kind of erasure.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here to tell the stories that I tell, which I think is also a good reminder for me, is that I've hit the point where I understand I'm here to tell the stories that I tell. I would love to write like a host of people who
I'm
I
sure.
don't.
Right.
I will never write that way. My parents always ask me questions like, "Why don't you write a book I can read?" Or "Why don't you write children's stories?" And I'm like, "I am not for children."
Right.
I don't know if you've met me.
It's a very far jump.
But I'm like, that is a leap. Like, but I am in this way, in that the world of who children are and who they're growing up to be in this particular world, I think I lean into that curiosity and exposure in ways that doesn't dumb down what they're going to be exposed to. And that I love, because I think that was something that was sorely missing from my education, that I had to read books that were more mature to find some of the experiences that I was going through at a young age that supposedly, Bobby and Rick and Jimmy and Susie never saw.
Right.
So
I mean, that could be a whole episode on its own.
What Timmy saw.
Like, and it's, if you're not seeing it in books and you can't ask at home, then you have to find out on your own.
Yeah. And I would much rather be the first introduction to certain stories, that I would much rather map those hard knocks onto my body than to other people's. It's one of the reasons why writing this book as a non-binary author, considering that every other book I've been writing under she, her, was so important to me, is because I learned so much from being a college professor about the sacrifice, particularly as a person of color, of taking on this additional burden of explaining to people what is looked at as a new identity, when in reality it has been such an integral part of communities of color for such a long time. So many of our languages don't focus on gender, and
especially spiritual.
Exactly. And in my continued search for reaching out to my own toward my own spiritual goals, I started to notice, in the same way that, as I talk about in the book, when the ways that Malcolm X took on the X as a way to acknowledge what of his story had been taken away. For me, I would love to see Black people acknowledge they, them as a very similar kind of call. It's an opportunity to unsubscribe from these binaries that have been invented to create ways to shackle us, in order to put us in a metric in which we will never measure up. That I will always be non-binary just simply by being born Black in this country.
Yeah.
There is no other alternative. And I like that I get to be a person that shares in that dialogue after having it with my students, after wrestling myself with figuring out, are you he, she, they today, and being that person. I like that I've been on both sides of those stories,
Right.
and can actually say, okay, this is something I can teach the children. I might not be able to teach you how to read without throwing in too many curse words.
Right. Like,
what
look,
I can
I know
say,
myself, so
I know my lane. I know my lane. And that's what gets me going. I get so excited about the stories that I have coming up. I think that's the reason why I don't worry about what I've shared in this book, because I'm like, whew, okay,
it's done.
now
Let's
we can
to the
get
good
to
stuff.
talking about, we can get to talking about something else. We can get to talk about, now that we've given you this primer and you understand what we're getting to, like, Timmy, let's show you how to really read.
Yeah. No, I hear that. And I think, what you have mentioned is almost an expansion of self and identity. How has that journey looked like for you from the day, I'm assuming 9 years ago, when you started this process till now? How has your identity expanded or shifted or grown?
Exponentially. When I think about the time that it took to write this book, one of the things that helped was that at the moment that I was struggling with finding people who would say that a story that was open to the world like this was also open to Black people, I came across a documentary where they talked about Basquiat and how Basquiat used to send his pieces to the MoMA before they would even accept him.
Yeah.
So they own a lot of Basquiats because he knew where the world was headed. And they meant, and when the interviewers asked, why weren't you taking Basquiat's work when Basquiat was hot? And it's because they mentioned the idea that they can only understand what is already present. They can't understand the future. And I thoroughly believe that I am writing to send messages to the future. And I am so far ahead in my mind in the stories that I want to tell next, that this just opened up the possibility of that great rift in the future for me, in which those stories are possible.
More dreaming.
More dreaming.
I think, from our conversation and from the book, I think I'm leaving feeling hopeful, right? And also excited for what dreaming looks like for me. And I hope that those that are listening feel the same thing as well, too. Is there anything that you want people to take away from your work and who you are as a person in general?
Absolutely. Once you know exactly what your dreams are, go out and get everything you deserve.
I love it. That's it.